hamster wheel? Squirrel cage? They're both rodents.
Your mic is on.
I know, but she hasn't started recording yet.
I don't know. Live, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Boyd, what item are we on now?
Thank you, Chair. We're in R5, report from the Environmental Services Division regarding local government climate action program funding.
Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the committee. Just a couple of comments about the report that you have in front of you. This is basically talking about what to do with some local government climate action program funding that the local governments across the province have been getting. So this is essentially replacing what used to be known as CAREP funding. Now it's called LGCAP, and we've been getting about $140,000 a year from 2023 through 2027. So 5 years worth of funding. The first 2 years of funding for 2023 and 2024 we're rapidly approaching a deadline for the time by which we have to have these funds committed. So that's the end of this month. So initially we'd been hoping that we would be a little farther ahead with our our greenhouse gas emissions framework and climate mitigation strategies, so that we would be able to use that to sort of tell where we could get the biggest bang for our buck with some of these new incentives for climate action. That report's been delayed. So what we've done is we've worked with SMT to commit some of the funds to a number of ongoing initiatives, and then we've still got about just under $150,000 remaining. So we looked at some of the existing initiatives that are supporting climate action to see what would be some potential candidates for these funds, and it seems that within the ongoing initiatives, it's the organics diversion program that we can get we know that there's some emissions reductions associated with that by keeping those organics out of the landfill. So we're both saving the emissions on shipping those down to Washington State, and also composting them rather than letting them sit and release methane as they decompose in the landfill. So to that end, we come to the recommendation that's before you, is to use the remaining 2023-2024 LGCAP funding to support the three-stream curbside, so the addition of organics to that. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Somebody move it. Moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director McClinton.
To speak to it.
Director McClinton, your mic's red.
Red means go. I just commend this initiative. This is a perfect intersection of practicality, cost savings, and helping the environment. I just couldn't be more pleased to move this forward and ticking all the boxes. Thank you.
Seeing no other hands, call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. The motion carries. That goes to the board next week. That'll meet your deadline. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Harris, R5. Oh, I didn't get you to read that one out. R6. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the committee. The purpose of the report is to seek direction from the Electoral Area Services Committee and to confirm the CVRD board bylaws, compliance, and enforcement policy. Bylaws enacted by the board reflect community values. Community values are not static. Changes in the composition of communities over time means that bylaws and enforcement practices need to evolve, as well as to respond to inevitable conflicts that arise within communities between different types of land use and competing priorities. In 2022, a bylaw enforcement service review was conducted to examine the service. Within the service review report, a comparison of the current CVRD bylaw compliance enforcement policy was made to other regional districts' policies. as it relates to identifying and undertaking proactive enforcement on a range of bylaw infractions. The current policy was found to provide broad authority for bylaw officers to initiate investigations. However, it was recommended within the report that an updated policy that clearly communicates the district's enforcement priorities and issues that will be proactively enforced would assist the directors in their interactions with their constituents and staff. It was also noted that such a policy would also provide consistent direction for bylaw enforcement staff and provide clarity of the level of service expected. The purpose of the policy is to establish protocol and guidance to enforcement staff and the general public regarding bylaw enforcement policies, best practices, and procedures within the CVRD. An enforcement policy is an effective tool to establish a framework for enforcement, and making it readily accessible to the public can help local government with limited resources manage public expectations while promoting transparency and accountability. Updating the current policy aims to better reflect the board's expectations of the regulations on which and circumstances under which officers will undertake proactive enforcement. Additionally, an updated policy will provide staff and the public guidance in relation to the identification of current enforcement priorities and enforcement processes. I do have a brief PowerPoint that provides a little more insight to the policy and some associated considerations for the committee. Let's see, it's going. Where'd it go? Try.
If we don't use that one anymore. The PowerPoint is usually.
Well,
We're just awaiting the arrival of the PowerPoint, Mike. Director Nicholson, do you have a question for Mr. Harris?
No, I have a question for you, maybe.
Oh, what did I do now?
You know, this is a really important topic, and I know that Director Acton is very engaged in this, and I would hate for her to miss this discussion. I was wondering if it would be appropriate to refer this to the next meeting.
Well, I think before we get into that, Mr. Harris, what are we looking at in regards to changes, bylaw changes? I was just looking at the resolution here. Have we got a time pressure? Like we're now implementation of bonds, right? Is this time sensitive right now?
yeah, so through the chair, what we're really seeking direction from the committee is as to what the committee's priorities are for proactive enforcement in the board, or sorry, in the CVRD. And if I can just run through the slideshow, it'll probably provide a little insight.
Please do, and make sure that the director from Area B gets a copy of this so that if we refer it, she's got it anyways, but please proceed with this.
Thank you. So what is the purpose of a bylaw compliance and enforcement policy? It promotes consistency and certainty and provides the public with clarity and detail on how and why enforcement decisions are being made. It establishes protocol for addressing.
I'm seeing that at home here. Well, sorry.
Because it's not shared on WebEx. So, while that technical issue is being addressed, it is going to be sent to Director Acton, and let's make a note that it be
Yeah,
sent
not a
to
problem at all.
Director
Yeah, carry on.
Wilson and everybody. All together now. No, we'll see if we can get it up there. We've got 3 great minds working on it at once.
I am prepared to just give a verbal of this.
Yeah, well, hang on just for a second. We'll see whether or not we can. You think we got it? Director Wilson, let us know if something pops up on your screen.
There it is.
Woohoo! So let's go back to Mr. Harris. Go for it.
Okay, so as I was saying, what is the purpose of the bylaw compliance policy? I've already advised of bullet 1. Bullet 2 establishes protocol for addressing bylaw-related concerns and provides guidance to the public and staff within the CBRD in an effort to treat all residents, both the complainants and the alleged offenders, fairly, transparently while promoting accountability. Policy allows the board to outline in a public way the goals of CBRD bylaw enforcement, to set expectations and standards for bylaw enforcement and the public promoting transparency and accountability. It guides administrative fairness, the overall approach to administrative decision-making that is transparent, fair, and accountable. Bylaws enacted by the board reflect community values and standards. The values are not static. Values evolve over time as community changes. Bylaws and enforcement practices need to evolve to respond to inevitable conflict that arises within communities between types of land uses and competing priorities. The Office of the Ombudsperson advises an effective bylaw compliance and enforcement policy will meet the following criteria based on administrative fairness principles. Is written in plain language that is easily understood and applied, sets out clearly what the policy is intended to achieve, and is flexible enough to cover a variety of circumstances where staff must exercise discretion. It does not fetter staff in exercising discretion by requiring them to take the same steps in each case regardless of the circumstances or discourage individual responsibility for decisions. It sets out relevant considerations that staff should consider when exercising discretion, and sets out its relationship to and accurately reflects governing legislation and bylaws. It is communicated to staff, it is readily available to the public, and it is reviewed and revised as appropriate given the changing circumstances in the communities. So, updating the current policy, what are the goals ultimately and the considerations for the committee? Is to really better reflect the board's expectations of the regulations on which and circumstances under which bylaw enforcement officers undertake proactive enforcement in addition to prioritizing complaints. What are currently the district enforcement priorities and what will be proactively enforced? Currently, within the current policy, there are no specified prioritized complaints. However, there is discretional consideration regarding the nature of the complaint, the impact of the violation on the community, the impact of the violation on the complainant and other individuals, and public safety and the urgency required. Consider bylaw enforcement priorities and proactive enforcement related to bylaw enforcement officer observations and public complaints such as the environment, things that may adversely impact the environment, unauthorized development in permit areas. Another consideration for priority would be health and safety, unauthorized buildings, construction, open burning. Thirdly, general nuisances, unsightly land use, noise. To take enforcement action or not, CBRD has no duty to take action with respect to every contravention that may be occurring within its jurisdiction. When deciding whether or not to take action, consideration must be given to staff resources and district priorities. If more proactive enforcement is desired for more specific bylaw matters, for an example, non-permitted short-term rentals, the board may also consider adopting operational policy or board resolution to guide enforcement. Thank you. Any questions?
Well, we've had your presentation. I think that there is some desire to, for perhaps considering this at another time with the other director, but I think we could also move this forward. Do we know when Director Acton is expected back?
I've messaged Sierra. She doesn't understand what.
Okay. And I just thought there was an opportunity between now and the 26th of March for her to pose any questions and have any conversations that she may need to have. Okay. It's great. I'm glad you're here. Let's go to the Director Deck. You're red. Don't press the button.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering. Why is the camera on me? I'm wondering, is that the body of the policy that you've just spoken about there? Or what's the process that you're going to follow if this is passed?
Through the chair to Director Deck. Essentially, there's a number of recommendations in what constitutes a good policy recommended by the Office of the Ombudsperson, balanced with our service review that essentially advises that the committee should consider prioritizing complaints and consideration of what will be proactively enforced for a better understanding, a little more transparency and accountability to the enforcement staff and the public themselves. So there are a number of criteria that makes a good policy, and I will bring that back to the table, but ultimately we are looking for direction as to what the board's priorities are or what they would like to see proactively enforced, and also consideration of specific operational policies. For instance, there's strategic direction for enforcement of the short-term rental, illegal short-term rentals. That would probably better be suited to be living in an operational policy that could be rescinded at any time. Not that the enforcement policy couldn't be, but the enforcement policy will lay the groundwork and check all the boxes for fair, accountable bylaw enforcement and the expectation of the board. Ultimately, the policy reflects what the board wants enforced in the CBRD. It's the board's bylaws, it's the board's policy, and we are looking for direction as to what are those priorities that could be proactively enforced, that the board would like to see, and have a fulsome policy that is good, essential bylaw enforcement and policies and practices associated with it. We do have one in place right now. It's not bad, but it's not to the ombudsperson's recommendations, and that's something we'd like to change and just have a better policy within the CBRD.
Thank you.
Just before I go to Director McClinton, I just have to share a conversation that was, I don't think it happened during my APC meeting, but I had a individual indicate that we were talking about proactive enforcement and the likes, and the conversation from one member was that they felt that the local government should only have bylaws that could be actively and successfully enforced. And the fellow across from this person said, I don't want the CBRD to have bylaw enforcement officers driving around in vehicles actively looking for bylaw enforcement infractions. So when the third person piped up and said, and that building down on Ingram Street is nowhere near big enough if we were to start proactively enforcing, because we wouldn't be able to house enough bylaw enforcement officers. So I think you're doing a pretty fine job of that balance. So, and that's what they're asking. Is there any area that we need to be modifying that level of engagement of our folks with the infractions that we have out there. I've got Director McClinton, then Nicholson next. Director McClinton.
Thank you, Chair. Tough act to follow. I couldn't agree more. I just first want to say I think you guys are doing a fantastic job, and I think you strike a really great balance between being respectful and, you know, really identifying, you know, cases that need to be pursued. By and large, and I can speak best about my area, Area G, and then on Thetis Island, and it's good, hardworking people that, you know, they just, you know, and if oftentimes if somebody's making a mistake, it's out of ignorance, and I think that people want to feel just that too much of that proactiveness, I think maybe takes away from that community feel. Certainly it needs to be there for egregious offenders who do exist. And I think the other part where just talking a little bit about the short-term rentals, the province has stepped in with some pretty fulsome, you know, regulations that are starting to take hold. And I think where a lot of that proactivity came, and I'm speaking for myself, I know that I was doing it out of, we got to get some houses for some people, but you know, from what I can tell, it's starting to work, right? And people are finding places to live, and it's nowhere where it needs to be, but rent prices are coming down, and you know, so even there, I just wonder, you know, how much we want to insert ourselves into the daily life of the average person. I don't know. I say a little bit less. So, thank you.
Dr. Nicholson, don't press your button.
I've been really good today. I've gotten on. Yeah, I've always thought that there are a few topics that we probably should be more proactive about, because I know the problem with the complaint-driven thing is that it often pits neighbors against neighbors. And I think that I think anything that we do should be preceded with an educational campaign. So I know that the lakeshore riparian lawns and big cement, you know, boundaries to the water, we know that that's not good, but I think that we should be monitoring really important areas like that, and going after people with it, because we can monitor it easily, and it sends a message to the whole community that it's important to understand, but it has to be preceded by a lot of an educational campaign. So that's the kind of thing I would do, and sort of blitz, like, okay, the next 2 years it's going to be riparian along lake shores, and then, you know, to kind of move around in a more targeted way. I think on the burning front, I think it hasn't seemed to be, in my area at least, as much of an issue of late, but I know that the bylaw doesn't work for people, and I know that people don't understand venting index stuff. So, you know, there's a real educational thing that needs to go along with this, but then you have to follow up with the enforcement, and that would be my preference.
Mr. Harris.
Through the chair to Director Nicholson and to Director McClintock, I fully agree. You know, the officers are empowered at any time to initiate an investigation. Reality is you can't go very far without observing something, and there's a balance of resources there. So essentially, really, we don't have to proceed with any proactive enforcement. It's at the will of the board, you know, and that's with the short-term rental enforcement as well. But if we prioritize, like maybe Director Nicholson has suggested, the environment and health and safety, so even as those complaints are received, we can prioritize the complaints received from the public, which we basically do anyway. So it's a bit of a soft sell. We are all for education. We know there's a line there where it's egregious, where it's very, you know, they'll be educated, but they probably will be ticketed as well. So maybe we can strike a nice balance in there with the consideration of the resources. The officers are very busy at this time, but this has been, this was a review through the bylaw enforcement service recommendation. And our policy should be upgraded to adequately try and meet some of the suggestions by the Office of the Ombudsperson. So.
Good. Look at you popped up there. Don't press the button.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to leave the meeting now.
Bye, Mike.
Good luck with your doctor's appointment.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.
So how come the camera's on Jesse?
Magnetic.
It likes you. I like what Director Nicholson said, and I like, updating to include the recommendations from the Ombudsperson's office. I have a question about, so we're talking about proactive enforcement. I don't want to accidentally fall into enforcing too harsh on housing when we're in this housing crisis. So I just want to ask a question about, in the report, you have that the board has directed proactive enforcement of unlawful housing, and the motion was that bylaw enforcement staff continue to exercise discretion on a case-by-case basis when dealing with complaints involving unlawful housing while prioritizing health, safety, and environmental protection. I guess to me, I don't read proactive enforcement there. But can you just tease that apart for me?
Through the chair to Director Siegel. Absolutely, that is a little out of context. I apologize for that, and I own that. Really, the board has directed bylaw enforcement officers to undertake proactive enforcement on short-term rentals, and unlawful housing is misleading, and like I say, I own that, and I apologize. And the action item that's listed underneath there was an action item in respect to the situation we do face with unlawful housing, RVs and things, which was board directed to continue to use our discretion. It is completely complaint-based. We are not seeking that out. I want to clarify that. And the officers continue to use their discretions the best they can to, as people try and transition to other accommodations. So, yeah.
The circumstance in which that was generated, I think you very well described the pressures that we were talking about short-term rentals, and we were also talking about inappropriate housing, and so it was, I thought, quite well done. So I looked at committee. Director Wilson's not with us any longer online. Any other additional comment? Go ahead. You need to press your button. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just move the recommendation and then ask that staff, you'd like to have something specific around where we want to see proactive enforcement? Is that what you're looking for, that direction?
Through the chair to Director Siegel. That was the suggestion. I can tell you right now, the reality is the officers do proactive enforcement, particularly within the environment. Machines on the lake, large swaths of land coming, they approach it right then and there without a complaint. They have to be able to see it to do it. Also, the backyard burning and land cleared debris burning, they're also proactively enforcing that at the moment too, where they will approach the owner, they'll educate them. It's not something we can easily turn a blind eye to. We are authorized to enforce at any time. And like I say, it's a very delicate balance of resources. So aside from really introducing some new components into a new enforcement policy, we could, the committee could consider that we will prioritize our enforcement actions, which we currently do, but it'll just be presented more formally within the policy for egregious environmental damage or health and safety. We do come across, unfortunately, very large buildings that are being constructed without permit, which tends, it's very hard for the officers to ignore. So I think that balance is there now. And maybe we can move forward with just an updated policy that captures some of the recommendations from the ombudsperson.
Sounds like you're doing a very good job. So I move the recommendation in the staff report.
Thanks. And that credit goes to the officers for being in the field as well, for sure.
So we've had it moved. We have a seconder. I have a question, because I think we trust the work you're doing, and it's quite good and no complaints. But I'm also wondering how within this policy, if it's considered in how it's written, that an issue arise that is brought to our attention, or it's brought to our attention by members of the public, and we want to give direction that you proceed on that, greater than just you've noticed it during your patrols and your normal duty. Is that contained in this report so that we could, in a open meeting, upon reflection of a report that's been given us, that we can direct that specific item now be a proactive enforcement item? And does this have to go to the board for an update of the policy, or can it be a direction to staff based on a report?
Back to the chair. That's a great question. And generally, we consider the current policy, or the bylaw compliance and enforcement policy, a general policy, sort of overarching guidance and principles of enforcement. What I think you're getting at is something arises, and we may want to, or the committee may want to specifically address it. It's more of an operational policy. So you'll see that there were examples within that report that are essentially two-liners in the heat of the moment to deal with whatever issue arises. It's a separate policy outside of the general policy that can be passed very quickly, by board to focus on anything we need to, and be rescinded as fast as it's enacted. So again, that would be, I think, going down the road of a specific operational policy that we can leave out of the general enforcement policy.
Excellent. Everybody clear? You want to read the resolution?
That it be recommended to the board that the bylaw compliance enforcement policy be updated and the associated bylaw enforcement operational policies be developed.
Been duly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Ms. Boyd, next.
I see no unfinished business, no new business, and no one for question period, unless you have a question for me. I ask to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. It's been a long blinking day.